DW Phillips is a filmmaker, journalist, and director of Ukraine Story, but he is also a constitutional attorney who specializes in issues that relate to the rule of law. In the past, he has successfully defended clients on civil liberty issues, including overreach by the FBI and DOJ, and brings a wealth of knowledge to the present issues in the news. And it is exactly that topic of overreach and illegality we are going to be exploring it in, I think, geopolitical depth. So buckle up for this conversation. Before we jump in, thanks to everybody who supports the work of DW and his team, as well as myself, in helping to make this content, to bring it to light and bring these stories to you. I don't think it's ever been more important than it is now to help guerrilla journalists, filmmakers, and activists like ourselves to get this message out. So thank you to everyone who supports. Now let's jump in. DW, fantastic to see you again.
Jonathan, my friend, you're a sight for sore eyes. I'm so glad to be with you. I'm sorry for our topic, meaning that I'm sorry that we have to talk about such a consequential issue at such a momentous time in the history of the West. But you and I have been tracking this for a long time. And guess what? We're here. And I'm glad to be talking to you about it because you have demonstrated a real clarity for a long time and have made a lot of prophecies. And I'm here to tell you your prophecies have come true.
Unfortunately so. And people say, well, okay, that's just a punt. And there's a few people who've been doom mongering, some of whom have far more erudition than myself, like Professor Timothy Schneider and Marcy Shore and others. But it seems to me that this is not a question necessarily of prophecy. It's a question of pattern matching. And I'd love to hear your views on that. And there are certain sort of key milestones which are leading to where we are now, and if we project them into the future, take us to a very dark place. That is, in my view, where law and sovereignty lose their absolute sanctity within our governance, within our rules, within our sort of hierarchy of priorities. But where do you think the sort of rot has set in?
Well, let's begin by acknowledging that there is a common theme to what took place in Davos, to what's taking place on the streets of Minneapolis, to the reason why people are freezing in Kyiv at this very moment, to the relationship between Witkoff and the Russians, to virtually every foreign policy and public policy issue out there. There is a common theme. They're all intertwined. And that is the movement from civilization, a Western civilization, which is rooted in the rule of law and the concept of sovereignty, and a movement towards a gangster philosophy where might makes right, and where the rule of law is dispensable whenever it does not meet the needs of the people that happen to be holding the machine guns at that moment in time. And all of those things I've mentioned, from Davos to the streets of Minneapolis, the same messages are being given, the same patterns are being seen. None of this is accidental, and people need to recognize that we are shifting paradigms. There has been, in fact, a paradigm shift of what it means to be civilization, from the West to Genghis Khan, from the 250th anniversary of the birth of the United States based on due process and a declaration that says that sovereignty matters, all the way over to the rule of philosophy of the Soviet Union and modern day Russia. It's a massive shift.
And it is extraordinary for those who continue on slinging the allegation of TDS at me. Some will know what that stands for. It is a cruel irony that this 250-year anniversary is falling under this current administration. I don't know whether this was a spoof using AI or not, but it seems there are to be coins issued with Mr. Trump's head on them. And I don't know if that's real or not, but I saw some graphics that have mocked that up. An extraordinary. Well, I mean, we know who else has money with their heads on it. I mean, we do, but the royal figures that we have on our coins have very, very little practical power and sway in the system.
And the reality is that if I'm correct, you can help me, Jonathan, if I'm wrong, but for the most part, we honor figures that are deceased on our currency as opposed to living figures. I can still pick up a British sovereign and look at past kings and present. But it's an odd thing, and to have a situation. I mean, it hails back to Roman emperors. It hails back to autocrats of the past that put their picture in everything because they want the world to know them. I'm always thinking of the poem Ozymandias. For those of our listeners who know Ozymandias, the great king who now is rotting in the desert, who wanted the world to know how powerful he is, and who quickly disappears with time. Here in America, it has been an insanity. It's been an idolatry. I don't know how to put it any other way, that the president shamelessly feels the need to have his name on just about everything. And people aren't really saying anything. I used to go to the Kennedy Center a lot as a boy because I'm a violinist. And now I have to call it, well, I'm supposed to call it the Trump Kennedy Center for the Performing Arts. Why does that need to be? Well, it's a reflection of something. In and of itself, that's just hubris. It's just uncomfortable. I don't like it. But it's a reflection of a perspective that of really a statist philosophy centered around a single individual.
And let's put it in further context because someone sent me an extraordinary picture the other day from it was in a courtroom or a courthouse in Oxford, and they sort of knew that I'd quite appreciate this. You know how you get in schools and stuff. Sometimes you get a list of people who'd been captain of the rugby team or all these kind of things. This was a list of all the High Court sheriffs of Oxford. This was the leading, legal figure. Um,
Fascinating.
can you guess the date that the first one listed as goes back to?
Oh, the 11th century. I have no idea. Tell me.
998.
Oh
Uh,
my
these
goodness.
guys had Viking names, and then it goes all the way through the conquest. But yes, there's a turbulence of history, but there's also this extraordinary idea that administrating local justice, either on behalf of the state or power or those in power, but there's an extraordinary sort of continuity, generation after generation after generation, which I think sort of tells us something here. But the situation we seem to be in is that people are deciding that this continuity of values, continuity of the idea, at least, of law, even though it may have changed over generations, that our systems right now are being subverted in the interests of the short term, are being subverted in the interests of the few, and it may be moneyed interest, it may be power interests, but it does not have this sense of a generational transition of values or deferring, let's say, some kind of accumulation of wealth in the present, deferring that because you have some concept of progress. Can we tie that into maybe what made the West powerful?
If you look at Notre Dame Cathedral, from the time that Notre Dame was initiated as a building 800, 900 years ago to the time that it finished was 120 years. Think about that. It went through 3 to 4 generations for it to complete. And it did so because there was a sense of generational continuity between the monarchs and the people with respect to the long-term objectives of the culture. That concept that we pass on to the next generation, the values and beliefs, and yes, we may make transitions for new information, for societal development, but there is a connection between generations is absolutely fundamental to the success and the life of a nation. And when a culture or a people or a leader break with that, it is the beginning of the end. It means that you have denied your past, you have denied your history, and you have sought to radically change your identity, fundamentally change your identity, which, by the way, is not just an emotional concept, it's a legal concept. Who are we as a people in terms of the law system we believe in, the values we believe in, not just the warm and fuzzies of flying flags and riding on horses, but actually propositionally, what do we represent? And if we go back to the final words of Ronald Reagan as President of the United States, his closing remarks, he said, America is different because we welcome the poor, we welcome others. You can come here from anywhere and become an American. That isn't true in other places. That is no longer true in the Trump regime, nor is Washington's claim in his farewell address George Washington said that it was a matter of principle and supreme honor that Americans properly carry out the treaties they engage in. He said, be careful what treaties you get into, because if you get into it, you have to follow them and you have to honor them. And that is actually what it means to be an honorable nation. Well, guess what? Right now, Jonathan, you can't open up an American paper without listening to somebody bewail our relationship to NATO, bewail our relationship to the United Nations, deride the UN Charter. And I want to say, for our listeners that are out there, that I've been a critic of the UN for many, many years. I've been a critic of NATO. I'm also recognize its absolute indispensability in the modern world. And I have to say this, that most Americans don't understand. If you invest in crypto, that's because international law works. If you travel on the ocean and you're riding a boat and you're not being attacked by pirates, it's because international law works. If you want to do overseas transactions, it's because international law works. If you want to land in another country and take out your passport in England or in Belgium and hopefully go through and meet your friends, or maybe as my son did, who studied at St. Andrews College, be able to study overseas, that's because of international law. So when conservatives, I don't want to say conservatives, when the present leadership says, oh, international law, blah, 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 it restrains us from being who we are, guess who wrote the international law? The United States of America wrote it. And we worked with our European allies to encourage them to adopt it, and we agreed to it for our mutual benefit. Guess who benefits from international law? We do. And we require that other people follow it. So getting back to our core thesis here, we've got a problem, which is, what's right for me is not right, we don't want it for you. And what we demand for you, we don't want for us, because we're simply thinking like Putin. We'll take what we want and we'll do whatever we can for our own particular benefit. But to the core issue, taking us from Notre Dame to Oxford University in 900 to the present of today, to simply destroy hundreds of years of legacy and generational belief and identity is an act of murder. It's an act of social and cultural murder. It needs to be called out for that. And it's unacceptable, but here we are.
And the other aspect of that short-termism seems that for perceived temporary gain or even sort of perceived political gain, there seem to be individuals, especially President Trump, who are willing to burn partnerships that pay off in the future, which is very difficult to calculate, but you can extrapolate back through the 20th century and, how economically beneficial that's been, given, US corporations, given US tech companies, given the defense industry. If you were to have a ledger and say, okay, well, you've got, the Marshall Fund here, the costs of the war, etc. It's likely, I think you would say, that the financial ledger where the US benefited from that system it built far outweighed
Oh my goodness.
what was invested in multiple order of magnitude. But interestingly, that's certainly not what's being discussed, and that's not how Trump and his ilk are framing this. They're using a different narrative playbook to tear these things down.
We're cutting off our nose to spite our face. The reality is this, that America is the massive beneficiary of the modern international order. The fact that there are downsides does not diminish from the upsides. Both can exist at the same time. But let's just think about this for just a second, shall we? Okay, so we get out of NATO, we make ourselves unreliable, we break international treaties. What does that mean for the United States financially? Well, for one thing, Europe will not buy our weapons. Europe will not give us the semiconductors that we need. Europe will not trade secrets with us. The things that we have assumed are part of the infrastructure of our economic success and strength will be gone, and they should be gone if we continue to behave this way, because we cannot expect Europeans to be beaten over the head. And by the way, Europe has lots of problems. I acknowledge that. I acknowledge that. They're not small. They're big. Everybody has it. But the American projection of what's the matter with you? You've abandoned civilization. You open up your borders. Well, guess what has happened in the United States of America? there's a level of hypocrisy which is deeply disturbing to me. We hold others to a standard we are absolutely not willing to hold ourselves to, and that never is a good thing. But to your point, yeah, we're going to suffer financially. Markets are going to be shut down. International trade is going to be curtailed. Certainly, our ability to have force projection overseas and to be an influence in the world will have a catastrophic end if we continue down this particular path, because all of this is based on goodwill treaties and agreements. So if we trash them, our base is closed and we withdraw. But Jonathan, I'm afraid that there are some Americans in leadership that actually want that. I think some of them think it's a good idea to have this fortress America where we no longer are vanguards of liberty. We no longer have force projection. We're no longer intertwined with Western allies, but somehow we have these cutesy agreements with Russia and with China, and we live in our own little circle. Hence, one reason for Trump's mad dash for Greenland, Panama, and everywhere else.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? Let's turn to the domestic situation because it seems that there is a link between the illegality and the impunity which Russia has long experienced and has tried to cultivate a world where there's a frictionless environment for, dare I say it, its kleptocracy and its business model to function. And that includes trying to corrupt political systems such as the UK and Londongrad and many other sort of instances of that. But we also see now, I would say, a growing impunity, especially when you look at not just ICE, but many aspects of the current administration, how they treat high court rulings, how they treat injunctions, how they treat a whole range of sort of instruments which are central to the division of powers under the traditional system. There seems to be not just this isn't just sort of random instances of doing what they want, but a systematic testing of the boundaries and guardrails of that rule of law system and the separation of powers.
I'm going to answer that, but before I do, I want to give just a little word of potential hope to our viewers. It's so bad. What you've said is accurate, and it's so bad that there is a growing backlash. We'll define it in a second, but right now, the recent Gallup poll that came out in January indicates that 42% of Americans consider themselves independents now, meaning that the Republican Party is 28%, the Democratic Party is 28%. Neither are any longer the majority party in America. And if you ask the 48%, which has been asked by Gallup researchers, what they think about this sort of heavy-handedness, abuse of the rule of law in the context of ICE and other issues, the majority of them disapprove with what the president is doing. What that tells us is that as the November elections come up, unless Trump corrupts the election process, which is always a possibility, the reality is that there are a lot of people that are very unhappy. I wish that the American population was unhappy about our foreign policy. I wish they were unhappy about a lot of things, but there's a growing unity of absolute shock that we have stormtroopers, mass stormtroopers in our city streets that are taking out private individuals and using these brutalitarian processes. And the hope that I want to give our viewers out there is that I think that there is a real possibility we're going to see a change in the House and the Senate, which is going to be a real kink in the armor of Trump, who presently has carte blanche to do whatever he wants and a rubber stamp from the Republicans who control both, to the incredible shame of the party of Ronald Reagan, the incredible shame of them. Now, what is that problem that we're talking about? Well, there's a reason why the Trump appointed MAGA U.S. attorney for Minnesota resigned. There's a reason for that. He resigned a week and a half ago because the Department of Justice under Pam Bondi, perhaps the most incompetent attorney general in modern American history, was telling them not to actually look at what the cop had done in the killing of Renee Good, but to investigate this woman's partner so that somehow you could incriminate her and build a case of what a terrible person she is, et cetera, and things like that. And the U.S. attorney resigned along with 9 other attorneys out there. Now, that's evidence of the systematic undermining of processes. When your own people are resigning because of how incredibly heavy-handed you are in trying to shut things down. Today, Barry Weiss at the Free Press put out a great article from the editors about the perpetual lying. I mean, not just gaslighting, but overt lying of Kristi Noem in twisting facts and information to subvert processes. We're not going to let you get to the front to look at the evidence. We're going to keep it from you. We're going to constantly gaslight you. We're going to lie about the facts to build an entire social media campaign of how unjust things are. Why? So we can invoke the Insurrection Act. That's why. Because we want to move us to the point where we can have martial law in the streets. And the same people who said a couple of years ago, why won't you just let Kyle Rittenhour exercise his rights as a Second Amendment person? Why don't you do that? Are the same people that are saying that this nurse is somehow obviously a criminal because he was legally carrying a sidearm. One little side comment on that. The response from the right has been, well, he didn't have a license. He didn't carry his license on him. That's a $25 petty misdemeanor. It's the same problem as if you don't have your license when you drive your car. It doesn't mean it's illegal to drive the car. It means you violated that small licensure. It's irrelevant. What he was doing was legal under American law. So you see this hypocrisy, and we're going to use whatever's necessary to reach our ultimate goal, which is maximum power. And I see us all moving step by step, incrementally towards the normalization of martial law, the normalization of goodbye habeas corpus, the normalization of see you later Fourth Amendment and Fifth Amendment. And Americans are, I mean, Jonathan, it's incredible. President Trump and Noam will put out something which is patently false, and then everyone is just repeating it over and over and over again as if it's a fact. So
Well,
we're
this is
going
what I
all
think
through.
people are missing. I mean, this was absolutely one of the things I was going to bring up here, which is absolutely quite extraordinary, and that is the presumption of guilt for your
Yep.
perceived political opponents. So we've got the
Yes, that's
summary
right.
execution, absolutely, and that's what everyone's focused on, and rightly, it's
Yep.
absolutely horrific. And actually, you know, what gives a border enforcement agency the right to supposedly, inflict law enforcement, which is not what they're doing, but their get out of jail free thing is we're doing law enforcement. Well, that's not their jurisdiction anyway. But I think what people are missing here is
That's right.
the presumption of guilt. Which has been adopted systematically by the administration or the regime, I think we can now call them. And of course, some Republicans who've been willing to be complicit in that have been wheeled out to do the same thing. Presumption of guilt is surely the opposite of the foundations of every tenet of, the US system.
Uh, in my first year of law school, one of the things I did was I read Sir William Blackstone, who gave the great English jurist who gave the commentary on the laws of England. In fact, Jonathan, I went to Williamsburg, Virginia, and I found a first edition, which was worth $40,000. And they allowed me to sit and read Blackstone from the first edition. It was just a neat thing for me to do. And he begins with the proposition of a number of things, but one of them is that the presumption of innocence is a bedrock principle of Western jurisprudence, which separates us from every barbarian, uncivilized, pagan, authoritarian regime in the history of the world. Those aren't all the words that he uses, but that's essentially the message. And you're really right about this, that the internet has also changed us because of the internet, the mentality of people is, I read something, they're guilty, hang them, kill them, fleece them, bring them into the public and execute them. That kind of mentality now people are applying to law. We have to protect the law because when the people become rabid mobs through the internet and things like that, the law still exists as a protector and a safeguard. I'll mention something to you, Jonathan, you might find interesting. 2 years ago, I was an attorney in a case against the FBI and the DOJ. And in this, just to let our leaders know, I'm not blue, I'm not red, I'm really outside of both of those particular paradigms. I'm very definitely independent in my thinking. I want to call balls and strikes. I want to deal with things based on what I perceive to be an objective standard. So I would represent somebody, I don't care what side they're from, based on what is objectively right as I see it. And I was in a case that had to do with tremendous DOJ and FBI political targeting and oversight. And we won that case. And the DOJ and the FBI had won 97.3% of all their cases. And the reason why we won was because we presented facts to a jury and had the opportunity that now the defendant had the ability to pay for it. Otherwise, most people can't defend themselves against the government, which is why most people can't bring cases against Donald Trump's FBI, or they just don't have the money to do it. And there aren't enough attorneys that can dedicate themselves. By the way, this is an aside, someone came to me some time ago and said, "Hey, would you like to be, uh, one of the new 1,000 plus attorneys they're hiring for ICE?" And I looked at them and I said, "Do you know who I am? I'm going to be on the other side of that courtroom. Are you kidding me? Me work for them? That's not happening. I'll see him in court, but I'm not going to work for them." But I thought to myself, you're hiring 1,000 attorneys? 1,000 for ICE? Well, you only do that if you know you're going to be breaking laws left and right, and you're going to be pushing the envelope left and right, and you want to jury rig the system. What I saw was that if you can actually present the facts objectively, free from social media interference, a typical person can see the difference between right and wrong, which we don't see when we're listening to the White House. So I still think there's good in the American people, and I still think we have the ability, absolutely, to know the difference, but it's all clouded by the massive propaganda machine, disinformation, gaslighting, and attempt to manipulate the systems by putting political people that are only loyal, they're not loyal to the law, they're loyal to the regime. Pam Bondi, Kash Patel, I mean, hello. It's like they're legal mouthpieces for whatever the regime wants to advance at that point in time. I don't mean to digress on two different points. It's just that everything you raise, there's 50 tentacles for us to look at, and they all point back to, will we be a nation of laws, or will we be a nation of individual men?
And this is what I find extraordinary is given how, in some ways, the US seems to sort of differ from the UK in that there is a much higher preponderance to have sort of recourse to law to settle disputes and reference to a written constitution, which of course we don't have as a single body of work in the same way. I'm endlessly fascinated and horrified by the idea that all of this architecture of legalistic thinking and reference to precedent and law seems to not provide a robust check and balance in reality when we've always assumed that actually, you guys were more protected than perhaps we were from,
Mhm.
let's say, executive overreach.
It's been a benchmark of the American system. And Americans in both the left and the right have been very vocal. I mean, if civil liberty is under attack, people are going to rise up. If we refuse to follow separation of powers, which is a fundamental doctrine, people rise up. The irony today is that the sides are shifting arguments. So, for example, in a recent lawsuit that was filed by Minneapolis against the federal government, what did they quote? What's the basis of their argument? It's the 10th Amendment. The 10th Amendment has been exclusively a conservative right-wing argument. The 10th Amendment says that the powers which are not expressly given to the federal government are exclusively given to the states, meaning that unless the Constitution says, yes, this is your job, federal government, it's the state's job. Well, under the Trump regime, it's ruled by executive order. I don't know if people understand how completely un-American that is. It's like the most un-American thing you can do is to have one person say, I'm waking up tomorrow morning, and you know what? Okay, 25% tariff on Great Britain because I want to. Okay, that's unconstitutional. You cannot do that. No, you are doing it. People let them do it. But what makes that even more just insane is that in the past, the only basis for a president giving a tariff, I'm just using tariffs as an example here, was if the Congress authorized some sort of general allowance for them specifically to do this kind of tariff. I didn't like it. I think those were problematic, but that's not what Trump is doing. Trump is doing that saying I can privately declare that we have an international emergency without Congress. And on the basis of that, I'm just going to assume the right to put tariffs. Nobody in American history has ever done that. The way Trump has done tariffs, no one has ever done it, ever. And the Republicans are saying nothing. And the Democrats are just running around too, like chickens with their heads cut off, because there are so many problems. They don't know where to start or what to do, and they don't have the majority. And Trump is excellent at chaos management. He's just the best at that. And that's what he does. Every day you wake up, there's a new chaos inflection. And people run from here to there. Nobody focuses on holding him to account. At the end of the day, the reality is that one man is calling the shots on laws or on rules, and that's disruptive of the American system, as you point out, fundamentally disruptive. And past generations, both left and right, would say, no way, can't do it.
Yes, it's an absolute aberration, but it also seems that and this is one of the problems, I think, in Trump's first term, exemplified by, I would think of it as the Rachel Maddow sort of crowd, which is basically to take all the systemic issues and problems and the fact that the checks and balances are not working and that there's an incredibly divided internal sort of political dynamic. We have on a smaller scale, but we have that same version here, of course, with I would say the very normal administration of Keir Starmer and the very radical forces of reform, as well as some hard left sort of stuff that's taking shape, and the green forces as well. We're living in a very abnormal age where the current, the previous certainties are breaking down, but there was a tendency to say, well, it's all Russia. I fall into that as well. It's all Russia's fault, right? They're responsible for everything. Whereas, as we try to point out, Russia works very much as a kind of arsonist. Doesn't always light the fires. Sometimes it does. Doesn't always light them, but it does, try to squirt accelerant onto the flames. And I think
Greenland being a great example of
a
that.
classic example. But what's your take on that thesis and the example of Greenland?
I think you're actually very much right. I love the expression that Russia is an arsonist. I think Russia throws its tactics against the wall and see what sticks. And when it sticks, they rejoice and they love, and then they stoke it, they flame it, they do things like this. Well, the situation for Greenland is quite obvious. I'm sure you've covered it on other shows, but the position that Trump, and we could talk about what happened at Davos because that's quite fascinating, actually. But the position that the Trump administration has said is actually incoherent from the beginning. And the incoherence is, well, Greenland is of vast strategic importance. Agreed. No disagreement there. Therefore, we have to own it. Well, hold on. We had complete access to do literally anything we wanted to do on Greenland, anything. And we're the ones that withdrew from it. Well, the only reason why Greenland even has Greenland is because some people landed on a boat. Excuse me? Do you know the history of the West? And by the way, we're the ones that signed the treaty at the beginning of the 20th century with Greenland. We got some benefits with the Virgin Islands and all this other stuff. And now you're just saying you want to disregard the treaty.
Let's not tell them that the Vikings landed a couple of hundred years on the territory of the US before. I mean,
Yeah,
that's an inconvenient fact.
there are many, many inconvenient facts. Just a whole nother show we could do is on the historical amnesia of the West. For the 80th anniversary and the 250th, the 80th of World War II, the 250th of America, we are experiencing such widespread amnesia of fundamentals that held us together, of who we were, our history. And the fact that the President of the United States and the Tucker Carlsons of the world are giving constant historical, grotesque revisions. And people are just saying, yes, yes, yes. I have a son and who was working at his job in a restaurant a week ago and asked a question, and his coworker did not know that Washington State was different from Washington, D.C. This is an American citizen. And I thought to myself, is this even possible? Do we really live in such a world of historical ignorance where people know nothing? And if you know nothing, then anything that the regime tells you, you're going to believe. So back to Greenland, the entire narrative that Trump has given is based on false history. And it's based on this sort of Putin's view of the world. And I'll just take it because I need it and I want it and you have to do it. And if you don't give it to me, I'm going to pressure you. I'm going to ruin your economy. By the way, the U.S. Constitution says very clearly that the power of taxation belongs with Congress. It's not with the president. A tariff is a tax. There's no way around it. It's a tax on the American people as well as on the British people. For the president to basically de facto declare a tax is something that the Constitution says you cannot do. Whatever people think of Rand Paul on issue A, B, or C, he is correct on that issue, that tariffs by declaration of the president are a violation. Without some sort of authorization by Congress, you just can't do it because of the implications of that. But Trump does all of those things with impunity, and people just say, yes, yes, whatever you say. Meanwhile, back over in Moscow at the Kremlin, Putin is as happy as he could possibly be because what he sees is the dissolution of NATO. Because the minute you put one U.S. troop in an adversarial position in Greenland, NATO is toast, it's cooked, it's over, which is exactly what he wants. So if he can't get it by negotiation, he'll get it by Donald Trump pushing his will into the nation of Greenland. I think Putin is quite happy. I don't think what Putin says matters. I think what Putin does matters and what he thinks matters, and I think he's happy about it.
And let's face it, it's a double win. It's probably there's many more layers to how he perceives that win there, but also the most active members of NATO as a subgroup are the Nordic, Baltic, Northern
Yeah,
groups, with the UK and probably the Netherlands included in that sort of broad alliance. They're the ones that are most willing to take action and invest in defense. And we could be doing a lot more, but historically, we're the most active. So it's to set those against the
yeah.
US is a double win there.
And in the process of doing it, we are embarrassing our country and hurting our friends. Just imagine, Jonathan, if you said to me, "Hey, DW, I need you to come here, help, fight by my side, be with me in this hour of trial." And I came and I lost some of my men standing beside you, fighting for you. And then a couple of years later, you said, "Well, yeah, you didn't even show up and you were hiding behind the lines." The way we have spoken, and of course, what are the two countries with the highest proportion of deaths after Article 5 was invoked by the United States? Guess who they are? Greenland and Denmark. So the kind of belittlement,
Mm.
uh, it,
And the UK, I saw this amazing
cruel.
figure. The
Yeah, it's
average
cruel.
UK serviceman, and Helmand was not exactly a picnic. In fact, one could make the case that it was one of the most contested spaces in Afghanistan. But if you run the stats, the average British serviceman serving in Afghanistan was 12% more likely to have a an injury or a fatality than their equivalent American soldier. And that's not to say everyone didn't suffer, they did. But
Right,
to
right.
say that it was a no risk deployment is kind of beyond ludicrous. But that's not what most Americans, most service people are, I think, rightly horrified by that as well in the US as well as across NATO.
There's a rule. The rule is you don't disparage servicemen. You go after politicians, yes, but you don't go after servicemen. They follow the orders that are given to them to their death. They have to live with the years and years of psychological damage for these wars and everything that comes from that. And when you disparage them, it's a terrible thing. But when you disparage people that did not have an obligation to stand beside you and chose to do so of their own free will, you are a vile person. You're truly vile. And what you're doing is cruel. And you're hurting their families, you're hurting your relationships. Jonathan, it takes so long to build up friendships, and you can destroy them in a moment through cruelty. And it's just there seems to be there's no filter whatsoever on what comes from the vice president or the president or Kristi Noem or the people that are in power in the U.S. And I just don't, as bad as this is right now, and as damaging as it is, I don't think that it's sustainable forever. I don't think Americans can tolerate this forever. What will happen, I don't know, but it's that bad.
Absolutely. Well, we've only got a few minutes left, and I think we're going to focus on what people can do
Great.
And let's talk a little bit. Actually, I'm going to take this, I'm going to put it to the head of the interview so that it gets the
Right.
maximum audience. Could you tell us a
Right.
little bit about the extraordinary effort you're engaged with to get critical supplies to Ukraine?
Oh, Jonathan, thank you so very much for asking me about that. The very first thing I would say is let's recognize this moment in history. Right now, Ukraine is going through a humanitarian crisis of epic and historic proportions. The reality is that Ukrainians, millions of Ukrainians, are living without power 21 to 24 hours a day in the dark in subarctic freezing temperatures of minus 20, minus 27 degrees Celsius. We're talking a nation without the lights on in the middle of the cold. Why is this happening? It's happening because we have allowed Putin to constantly, without impunity, without accountability, bombard the energy infrastructure. And so that our listeners can understand, Jonathan, how this works, Putin will lock down on various generators. We will send our team. Ukraine will send teams out there to rebuild them. And no sooner are they rebuilt, he hits them again and knocks them out, making the ability to sustain energy almost implausible. And yet you have these heroic energy workers sometimes doing 24-hour shifts because they know that if they don't do that, people are going to freeze to death. What am I doing? Well, my organization, Ukraine Story, which is a 501c3 foundation in the United States, I have organized a convoy and a team that's going from Poland into Ukraine, and we're going to three, four, possibly five regions. We work with local people on the ground who are very trusted, local organizations to identify families, I would say, with special needs. Now, the reality is everyone has a special need in Ukraine. And the reality is we cannot solve the problem of the freezing cold for everyone in Ukraine, but we can solve it for some, and then we can use that to amplify the message to the world. That's what I do as a documentary. Jonathan, you and I work on documentaries together. And we have some coming up in the future that we've been prepping for, and that's what we do. So I'll give you an example of one person, one of the people that we will be bringing 5,000 to 8,000 watt generators to in this convoy coming from Poland into Lviv, the various regions of Kyiv, and then moving out to the east. Like, here's an example. A woman, her husband was killed by Russians this last year. Right after she was killed, she found out she was carrying a child. She gave birth in the freezing cold without energy and electricity to her newborn infant daughter just a couple of weeks ago. She's going to get a generator so she can stay strong. There are elderly people that need generators. There are kids that have parents, have dads that have died in the front lines, moms at home. They need a generator. So I buy generators in packages of 10. They range individually between $500 and $1,000 a piece. A package of 10 is about $6,000, $6,500. If you want to help us, I'll ask you, Jonathan, if you'll put the link below, ukrainestory.org/donate. Our password is power to the people. ukrainestory.org, donate, power to the people. And we could use help. I hope to be on the road very soon, but I need more packages of generators because we want to reach as many people as possible. It's an exciting thing to be able to help some because we can't help everyone. But by helping some, we hope to let everyone know about it. Jonathan, you and I know the West is so distracted right now through all the antics which are taking place. My mission is to redirect people towards a real, massive, historic humanitarian crisis, which, by the way, we helped to create by giving aid and comfort to Putin. So we have a responsibility. We should care desperately. We can't just sit back and say, oh, look at all the people freezing to death. We need to say, what can we do? So for my part, I'm leading a convoy, bring as many generators as I can, and it's happening very soon. And I would definitely appreciate the help of anyone who wants to allow us to get a couple more generators, another package perhaps.
Incredibly important. This is one of the most important things that people who constantly ask on the channel, what can we do to help? This is perhaps the most immediate requirement here. Get the civilian population through. They support their military as well. It has ripple effects that help Ukraine to stand. DW, we're going to have to cut it there. But there's a million things we could and should talk about and will talk about in the next one. And of course, we'll keep the channel up to date with how your fundraiser is going. Thank you so much for coming back on.
Jonathan, great to be with you here today. As always, thank you for the hard work and the clear voice that you bring to this defining issue of the 21st century.
I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone who supported the channel through 2025 and all those, of course, who are contemplating supporting us in 2026. We've run many events on the ground in the UK, Europe, and indeed in Ukraine as well. And some of the images of those events are on the screen as you see this. Your assistance has been absolutely invaluable to making it happen. And in 2026, we won't be able to do this scale of activity, have this impact, or even think about having these ambitions without your help and support. There are many ways you can help. Of course, liking, subscribing, making sure you are actually subscribed to the channel, because sometimes YouTube seems to kick people off their subscriptions unexpectedly. But actually also adding comments and sharing materials around your network. It all has a tremendous impact. Now, I know many people watching this channel contribute to Ukrainian charities and do what they can, but aren't necessarily people of huge means. But if you can, if you're able to, and if you see value in this work, please do contribute if you can. We have links to Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, and even GoFundMe. That is all in the description of the video. Any support you can give will make sure that we can have not just the same level of impact this year as we did last year, but we can actually increase it. And the aim, in fact, is to double our impact this year, to go from reaching about 1.5 million people per month with our content, doubling that to 3 million, and also doing many more events to help support Ukraine, help support the concept of democracy and resilience. And as we know, 2026 is turning out to be even more dangerous than 2025 was, and the existential threat to democracy, freedom, Ukraine, those aligned with Ukraine, is greater now, perhaps, than it has been at any time since the full-scale war. Thank you for listening to this. Thank you for all of your support.